Great. So you're all very welcome to the first of our BICS information sessions, and we're delighted that we have Sean and Cameron here, who are our BICS Chief BICS Adjudicators. My name is Rena. I'm the BICS chairperson, and here we have Laura as well, who is our BICS secretary. So I hope that you'll find this very useful, and it is also going to be recorded, and the video will be available on our website, bics.ie. Thank you all for coming along today.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rena. And thanks so much for everyone for joining. So as Rena has said, Sean and I are the two chief adjudicators for the BICS Awards. So we've been involved, I think, Sean, at this point in nearly 10 years or so of BICS as students who applied first as applicants like yourselves, and then moving up the ranks in terms of judging and now to the chief adjudicator position. So this is my third year as chief adjudicator, and it's Sean's second year. I'm based in the University of Galway and I'm doing finishing up my PhD here. But I've been involved in societies and kind of community work for the vast majority of the time that I've been here. So, Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, folks. Hi, my name is Sean Riley. So, as Cam was saying there, I think the years are running away from us. I think this is actually our 12th year being involved in
Well,
BICS in some shape or form. Like that, so I previously would have been an attendee of the University of Galway, and I still worked at part-time there, as a part-time lecturer. And I've been involved, this will be my second year as chief adjudicator at BICS. And of course, I can't, like I'm sure many of you on the call, I can't wait for it. It's definitely a highlight of my year every year that I get asked to come back to be involved in some shape or form. I think, Cam, you could attest to that point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like between the two of us, we have nearly 2 decades of society experience of being people in committees, being people organizing events, supporting societies, mentoring societies through this process. And the aim that we have today with this session is to give you a little bit of an insight in terms of what the judges think and how they look at the applications and portfolios and interviews that you do, and hopefully to maybe alleviate some of the nerves or kind of stress that you have around it and try to make this process as easy as possible for you. So the awards this year are on April 10th. This is from last year, all the societies that attended the BICS Awards in 2024. You can see the excitement on everyone's faces, and hopefully we'll see some of you there as well in Sligo this year in the Clayton Hotel. And we'll give you a little bit more information towards the end about kind of the running order of the day and what that might look like. But if I can, what awards are up for grabs? Sean, do you want to take us through that?
Yes, so there are 14 awards in total, I believe. Now there's some awards that are split between large and small college categories. So I suppose the large college categories would be typically the universities, the small colleges would be the smaller entities, formerly Institute of Technologies. Of course, now a lot of them are grouped into technological universities, but they're split simply as for, I suppose, fairness and parity in terms of comparing societies. So we have three best society category. I suppose if we deal with maybe the best society, charity and civic, first of all, it's for any societies that follow either a charitable or civic function. And then we have the best society departmental, which typically is a society that's aligned with an academic department within their university. And then the third category, cultural, academic, social, I suppose would be the catch-all category for societies who would not fit into the other two categories that have been mentioned. We've best event then, so it's fairly self-explanatory. It's for any events that have been taking place during the year. We've the most improved society award category, which is for any societies which have improved their performance compared to the previous year to the most extent. So it's not necessarily that they're the best society on campus, but the level of improvement that they've undertaken from the previous year to this, it's measuring that achievement. We've best new society for any societies that have only been in existence for the last 2 years. And then the last two categories, best individual and best fresher. They're both individual awards, but the best fresher award is for first year students, their first time being involved in societies, whereas the best individual is for an individual has been involved more than 1 year in societies and is recognizing that effort. So then separate to that, we have, I suppose, the categories where it's combined. There's no distinction between large and small colleges. And those are best poster, best promotional video, best intervarsity, which is an event which links 3 or more universities that are taking part in organising it. The best mental health promoting event, the best green initiative, and then the best photo. And we note there just on the screen, so the best photo and the best poster awards will be judged by the attending colleges. So each college will get a certain number of votes. You won't be able to vote for your own entry that year, but you'll be able to vote for others, and they'll be adjudicated, I suppose, on a voting basis rather than by a judging panel. The other categories, all other categories will be judged by a specific judging panel, and we'll go into some of the details about that later on in the slides.
So in terms then of the application process, there is a session happening next week that's going to go through in more detail in terms of how to write an application, what the questions are like, and any sort of clarity that you might need on those. But I suppose we want to give you an overview in terms of what the judges see and how they interact with the application process. And as you see, so there's an application form, an interview, and a portfolio. So broadly speaking, most of the marks that you get for these awards will come through your application. So we've tried to streamline that process this year, so it's a little bit easier for you to get the most out of that application. And generally speaking, the markers have a maximum of 200 marks based on these things that we have below. So your application form, 90 marks. Your in-person interviews, also 90 marks. That's marked along the same categories as your application form. And it's really important here. We'll talk a little bit more about the interview in a couple of slides' time. But sometimes when you get to the interview, they're not going to ask you a question of every single part of your application. And it's not because they don't want to ask you that or that they suddenly don't care about that particular aspect of it. It's because you've given them enough information in the application form that they don't need to ask you about it. So say you've explained your aims and objectives really well, it's really clearly laid out. They're not necessarily going to ask you a specific question about that because they don't need to get that. The interview is really for the judges to try and give you more marks and kind of tease out some of the details that are in your application form that they just like to know a little bit more about and a little bit more about you or the society that you're part of. The portfolio then is worth 10 marks, and we have a number of slides that will go through that. But it's really important to remember here, the portfolio isn't marked on who has the prettiest portfolio. The portfolio is marked on who has the best and the most clear, concise, and relevant content. So it doesn't have to be this massive display that you've made and that you've built and put loads of time into. You can do that, of course, but there's no marks going for who has the prettiest portfolio. And we reiterate to the judges that they're not to mark the portfolio based off of what they see in terms of the visual representation of it. They're to mark it off the content. And we say that your portfolio should marry your application. So if you've mentioned something in your application, so Sean and I are in a society and we're up for best event, and we've said that we've created 3 different posters for the event and we put them up on campus. In the portfolio, the judges will be expecting to see copies of those particular posters in that section so they can see visually what you mean by the posters that you've made. And the last section that they judge you on is the overall impression. It's called the discretionary marks. Overall, what kind of impression or feeling did you give the judges about the work that you did, about the society that you have, or about the improvement that you've made? And that's marked out of 10 marks. But as I said, the vast majority of the marks that you're going to get are going to come from your application form.
So the application form then is split, broadly speaking, into 3 sections. Now, this doesn't apply to all the awards because certainly for the individual awards, Best Individual and Best Fresher, they are specific to an individual. So they would have slightly different sections. But for the main awards, for Best Society, for Best Event, Best Most Improved, they're broadly speaking, they're split between organisation, finances, and then communication and publicity. The first section, organisation, as you can imagine, it's fundamental for any society to be organized, to have a structure in place. So that section takes up quite a sizable chunk of the marks. Typically, it takes up maybe about 40 to 45 marks out of the total of 90 that's going for your application form. And it covers in sections such as committee structure, such as any challenges you might have faced during the year, what you have taken, steps you've undertaken to ensure that there's a smooth handover and continuity into the next year. And of course, fundamentally, with any society, it's there for its members. So how did it appeal to its members, and what events did it put on for its members? So the events tend to be quite a fundamental part of that section. And then if we move into finances, well, finances, I suppose, on one level, it's intuitive enough. It's about money. It's about organising the society. But maybe better way of thinking about the finances is not just necessarily a monetary finances. It's not about the number of euros that are going through the bank account of any society. It's about the resources that are available to the society. What resources have that society committee sought out and what they have actually generated for themselves and how have they used them. So some societies might have turnover of over 100,000 euros a year. Some societies might have turnover of 100 euros a year. That doesn't measure their success one compared to the other, because really speaking, a society maybe with 100 euro, even no euro, they might be seeking out other resources that are non-monetary in nature. So they might be getting sponsorship of goods, they might be getting the use of free venues, they might be getting other non-monetary kind of resources that they're using to put on the best, I suppose, best events and best experience they can do for their members. And then finally, the third section, communication and publicity. It's about how you're promoting your society. Are you using online forums such as the social media platforms, or are you using some of the more traditional methods? So some like press releases, for example, using the internal email system of the university to get generating your events, posters. And one thing that I always like to see in there as well is that old-fashioned face-to-face communication where you're actually talking to your members directly and not just talking to them from behind the screen.
Perfect. And just to kind of cover it as well within this particular process, the judges here aren't trying to test you. You know, they're not trying to figure out what did you do and why is it important. They want to see the enthusiasm of your society. They don't want, you know, they're not looking for the best polished essay. They're not looking for the best polished answer. They're not going to judge you or mark you down if there's some spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. What they're trying to see here is the overall feel and impression of the society. What did you do that was different to other societies on your campus or other individuals on your campus that sets you just that little bit above what other people have done? So thinking about the things that you've done in terms of, like Shauna said, in terms of non-monetary value as well. It's not all about raising loads of money for charity. It might be that you got a free venue for the entire year that meant that you saved a lot of money. Or it might be that you collaborated with the marketing office in your university or your institute or your technological university to get some publicity for your members. Anything that you can think of that you think sets you apart from other societies, that's what they want to see. But they're overall looking for, why are you so passionate about what you do? And this comes across quite nicely in the interview. So these will be conducted on the Thursday. You'll get in advance a timetable of when your interview will be, along with the actual room location of where that will be. And you'll be directed on the day. There'll be loads of people around to help you to help you navigate to where you're supposed to be. Most of the time, this tends to be the point of where people are getting huge amounts of nerves and overwhelmed and a little bit kind of shaky or scared to go in front of the judges. So we want to kind of maybe give you some tips and some guidance on this. So for each panel that has an interview, it'll be a 15-minute interview with the applicants, which goes really, really quickly. It goes in the blink of an eye nearly. Every single student that we've talked to over the last number of years, and Sean, you can attest to this as well, they'll come out of the interview and they go, geez, that was really quick. So it is a space where you can maximize the time. If there's something that you really want to tell the judges, you can build that into your interview. We suggest that for most award categories that up to 4 committee members can attend, no more than 4, but you don't have to have 4. Best fresher and individual is slightly different. It's a maximum of 2, and we say that so the individual or fresher that's going for the award can bring someone to support them in that interview process. And usually what that person's role is, if Sean's going for best individual, sometimes we struggle to talk about ourselves really positively and kind of boast nearly about what we do. So my job as his support person would be, Sean, do you remember you talked about this here, but also do you remember you did this event? So we're there to kind of give some encouragement, to give some guidance, and to support the person in the interview. In the larger award categories where you have up to 4 people, for example, if you're going for best society, cultural, academic, social, we would suggest that you bring people in relevant to the application form. So if you're talking a lot about finances, make sure that your treasurer is there or someone that can talk about finances. If you're talking about the communication that you did, make sure that your PRO is there. So it's about figuring out who's the best placed to be in the interview. It doesn't necessarily have to be the top 4 people in the committee. It could be people that are relevant to the particular interview. If your committee is someone, or you have someone that doesn't particularly like being in interviews, they don't have to go. You can replace them with someone else on the committee who's more comfortable with that space. Not everyone is comfortable sitting in front of an interview panel, and that's absolutely fine. So it's a conversation that you should have internally with your group about who's best placed to go for it. And in terms of a couple of tips, and I suppose this is what we want to talk about in terms of alleviating maybe some of the concerns that people have. The judges here, they want to give you marks. They're not testing you on what you wrote. It's not an exam. They're not going, you said on page 3 of your application that you did this. What was the answer? It's not like that at all. Generally speaking, the judges the day before, they'll have marked your application. They'll have looked at all the information in the portfolio and they'll have given you a set of scores in all the different categories. And maybe in the categories, they're like, actually, I wish that we had a bit more information about publicity. So when you come into the interview, they might just ask you straight away, okay, well, can you tell us a bit more about how you promoted the society? And it's in the interest of giving you marks. If the judging panel hasn't asked you a question about a particular area, it's again not because they don't care about that area. It's most likely because they have enough information to give you the marks for the interview for that particular section. Don't be afraid to show your personalities in the interview. We've had people before. The example I always think of is the Medicine Society from the University of Galway. They went in for an award and they went in and they did like a CPR type kind of show or act. And they were doing it in terms of how they had revived the society. So they showed a little bit of their personality and then they got into the interview. But you do have to remember that time is limited. All of those things that you do takes up time that they could be asking you questions. So it's a fine balance. You're not going to go in and do a 5-minute monologue and then have 10 minutes for your interview, but you can show your personalities. Some people will dress up in clothes that represent their society. Some people will have clothes from events that they've done. Some people will do a little bit of a skit. It's up to you how you enter or approach that. But it is something that you can do in terms of showing your personality. One of the really, really important things that we say is to share the questions. There's nothing worse for a judging panel than only one person out of the 4 people answering the questions. So have a plan before you go in, sit down, look at the application, look at the different areas and say, okay, Sean, will you take the finances? I'll take the communication. Rena, will you take the organization section? So everyone knows roughly, if there's a question about organization, Rena knows, okay, she's going to step in and answer that question. But if you do come across someone that's answering a question and they get a little bit stuck, help them out. Jump in, say, look, do you remember this? We actually also did this event. We actually did this as well. You can play off each other and bounce off each other in terms of having that conversation. You'll be feeling more relaxed. The judging panel will feel more relaxed. And it's much more of an enjoyable experience if you're all just thinking of it and treating it as if it's a conversation and not just one person answering all of the questions. And the last point is be enthusiastic. Show the passion that you have for your society. Show the reasons why you got involved in societies in the first place. For a judging panel, if a panel comes into them and they're sitting there and they don't really want to answer the questions and they're not really engaged and they're kind of sitting a little bit glum, they're not really going to score all that well in the interview. And it's not necessarily because they haven't done an amazing job, but it's just that it's not coming across to the judges. They're not giving them anything to mark. So try and be as enthusiastic as you can, showcase why you do what you do, and showcase that passion you have for your societies.
So onto the BICS application, in tandem with the application is the portfolio. So I suppose what exactly is a portfolio? Well, ultimately, the portfolio is the visual representation of what your society activities have been over the past year. And typically it's there as visual evidence to support what you're saying in the application form. So if you're referencing you've had, for example, 20 events over the course of the year in your application form, in the portfolio, you would expect to see some evidence of those 20 events, be it maybe screenshots of communications around the event, advertising the event in advance, any posters for the events, and then for the bigger events, you might want to see some photographs of the events taking place, showing your members actually, in participating. So really, it's about visual evidence. It's not intended to be additional written content, or at least the writing aspect of it tends to be minimal in its nature. It has to be more minimal in its nature because you've already done the writing in your application form. So this is here to show the kind of the visual elements of the photographs and the evidence of the materials that your society has used over the year. So they could be videos, it could be photographs, anything that's been published, for example, articles in the newspaper or kind of an online forum. You can have also maybe examples of your committee meeting minutes or your committee meeting agendas. If you're evidencing the role of the treasurer and how you manage the finances of the society, you might put in a sample of invoices or a sample of communications that you might have had with sponsors or fundraisers. And with this in mind, it's good to gather information and keep track of that information as you go through the year. So certainly back in my time, maybe a Google Drive, using a Google Drive that was associated with the Society's email is a good place to store a lot of that information. So what do we include in the portfolio? Well, if you're trying to evidence what you've done in your application form or back up what you've done in the application form, to an extent, it probably has to mirror some of the information that's been in the application form. So it probably needs to be divided into sections. Certainly, there would have to be some sections in it around how you organize the society, a section perhaps on finances, and then maybe a section on communication and how you interacted with your society members. A crucial part, I suppose, of any society is its events, because that's what makes the society, that's what gathers its members and makes it appealing to, the institution's members. So anything to do with events, that's probably nearly warrants a section in and of itself, because events are what drives any society. And I suppose really it can also include information that maybe doesn't neatly fit into your application form. So there might not be a section dedicated to it in your application form, but it's a good idea to put in information such as maybe testimonials from either your committee members or your ordinary members of the society as to how the society, helped them and their experience of their, their academic life as well. So really, the key point is to support everything you write. If you're writing about it in the application form, bear in mind that you'll have to evidence that as part of your portfolio, because that's what the judges will be expected to see. So we had some do's. Of course, there are some don'ts as well. I suppose the point number one, don't write a thesis. So judges, like when they're adjudicating on their panel, they may have 6 or 7 other application forms in tandem with your application form. These application forms can run to a considerable length. So the judges will have done a lot of reading on day one. They don't want to read anymore when they look at your portfolio. They want to see something visual, something striking, something that will make you stand out as well, and it will be more so, I suppose, interesting for them to watch, rather than just a rehash of what you've already put in the application form. Keep it structured. One point I would say is thematic portfolios sometimes work. A theme that might be maybe in keeping with the societies that you're involved in. So I'm recalling one year I seen a portfolio from Medicine Society where they actually made the portfolio beautiful document, and they made it in the form of a patient file, because obviously being a med society, mostly doctors and trainee doctors were involved. So a patient file would be very much in tandem with, I suppose, with what that society was doing. Tip number 3 there, don't provide links on wonderful stuff on paper. So obviously if it's an online document, you can click onto a URL and it'll bring you there. You can't do that with a printed out document. So if you are including anything, put it on a USB or something that the judges can plug into their laptop and then can see it very much. And then of course, if you're putting any information on a USB, make sure that the links actually work and test them before you actually save it down. Something to just bear in mind, some of the adjudicators, they may have security settings on their laptops, so it might be no harm to have some backup email information or something that you can send to the chief adjudicators that they can then distribute to the judges if the USB stick won't work.
Perfect. And then, so we have a few more don'ts, but just to maybe reiterate as well. So some people are more comfortable with writing and printing a portfolio and doing kind of a visual piece. As we said, it's not a contest for who's doing the prettiest or best portfolio. We are also encouraging this year people to do virtual portfolios. So to do something online and to give it on a USB to the judges. You can still design it in the same way in Canva and PowerPoint or in whatever, I suppose, tool that you want to use to help you do that. But there's no expectation to print out a portfolio this year. You can do it, as I said, virtually on a USB and hand that in. You're not going to lose any marks or gain any marks by having a virtual portfolio versus an in-person printed kind of design portfolio. And that's up to the individual committees and societies. Some people, as I said, prefer to do that kind of physical piece, and some people prefer to do it online. We accept both, and we're encouraging people to trial or to try out doing a virtual portfolio this year and giving it to us on a USB. The judges can still judge it the same way. They can still mark it. They have access to everything. And you also avoid that issue of having a URL printed on a piece of paper that judges can't look at. In terms of the last couple of don'ts that we have, so don't make everything the same. So try and mix it up, try and have photos, posts, videos, recording, give something that's appealing to the judges to look at. If they're looking at the same kind of thing over and over again, oftentimes, first of all, information gets lost, and the judges don't necessarily always catch what you're trying to tell them or what you're trying to showcase to them. So try and vary all the different things that you do and vary the faces that you have in the pictures. Don't just have the same 3 or 4 people in every single picture at every single event. Try and vary that up, but try and get pictures of your committee members if they're happy, pictures of your members, and pictures of the different things that you're doing. Don't send more than one portfolio. So if you do a physical portfolio, 1 copy is fine. You do not need to make 3 of them. And if you're doing a virtual portfolio, 1 USB is fine. The judges can look at this together, and they often come together in little groups and they'll discuss and they'll chat and say, what did you get from this? Do you see this? And they'll have those different discussions. So there's no need to send more than one. And then don't think any mad idea that you have isn't going to fly. The judges that we have, a lot of them have come back from previous years, so they've seen everything and anything. So if you've got a really creative idea about how you would like to showcase your portfolio, have an opportunity to do it and see how it works out. The main point being that there should still be the content that the judges need in that document to support your application. The actual little design around it is really up to you, but it's that important piece of making sure that the content is there for the judges to look at. There's a number of awards that have no interview or portfolio, but they do have application forms. So Best Video has an application form. You'll give a link to the particular video. Again, we would recommend, if you could, to put that on a USB for the judges to look at so that they're not getting a piece of paper with a URL that they then have to try and type in or get. Best Green Initiative and Best Mental Health event. Best Poster, Best Photo, also a very short kind of naming aspect of their application, and you must supply, and you'll do this through your society's officer or the person who's leading your delegation to BICS. You'll supply a copy of this particular application, but there's no interview or portfolio assigned to this. So when you come along on the day, you'll have a lot of free time in the morning when the interviews are happening, and then you'll be able to join the peer sessions. As Sean has said, best photo and best poster is judged slightly different to the rest of the categories that we have. They have an application, but do not have an interview portfolio, as you said. You will need to supply a high quality photo or poster and fill in the application form. If possible, on the poster and the photo on the back of it, to write the society and the college name. It helps us in terms of keeping track of everything. And when the different universities and technology universities and colleges arrive on the day, they'll get a number of ballots to vote on both of the posters and the photos. As I said, each college will have 2 votes. You cannot vote for yourself, so your college will be written on top of your voting ballot, so you cannot vote for the one from your university. And that will be there'll be a time to submit those. Those will be counted up, and they will be awarded then based off of what the students who are there as applicants feel is the best poster or the best photo.
So, to keep some perspective, I suppose the thoughts of a portfolio can be maybe can be daunting to people, particularly if you're not someone who naturally likes dealing with visual arts. So if you're someone like myself, for example, who's very much prepares the pen than anything pictorial or photographic, it can be quite daunting. Bear in mind, as Cameron has said many times already, it's about the content. So it's not necessarily about making a portfolio look very pretty or making it look like an amazing artwork. It's about whether or not you're actually evidencing visually what you have said in your application form. And bear in mind also that the marks distribution, it's only going to be worth 10 marks out of the total of 200. So the amount of marks going for that portfolio is limited. It's quite limited. So it can take up, people can spend an awful lot of time on their portfolios and maybe, I suppose, lose that point that it's actually not worth a lot of marks. Having said all that, given that it evidences what's in your application form, that 10 marks might just be for the actual portfolio itself. But if you do not have the evidence to back up what you have said in your application form, there is a question mark as to whether those marks, can be actually justified if you don't have the evidence behind them. So it is important that there is some content there that is backing up everything that you've said in the application form. So if you're saying that you've run 200 events this year and have been attended by 50+ people, each one of them, you want to see some photos of the events, you want to see some screenshots of the posters and the social media posts that went around promoting those events. Without it, then the question is, well, is that content really authentic? So it's a portfolio is useful in that it gives authenticity to anything that you've actually said in your application form. And I think that point is there as well. So that's a good word to remember there, the symbiosis, I suppose, between the two, your application form and your portfolio. They have quite a symbiotic relationship, and that's something that you need to bear in mind. And I suppose that maybe is it's very unusual that people would write fibs or would write something that's untrue intentionally in their application form, but bear in mind that like the portfolio, the marking distribution between applications, portfolios, and interviews, three of those combined ensure that it's actually the authentic lead best society that will win overall in the award. So just bear that in mind, that evidence is expected there as part of your portfolio.
And sometimes that can be what often separates first from second, is that they have a clearer sense of what your society did based off of the information from your interview, your portfolio, and your application. The judges have said they want to give you marks, but they want to see the things that you're talking about. They want to immerse themselves in the work of your society. And the last point here just is that sometimes in societies we can have a tendency to maybe sometimes to take the lead on stuff and be the person that's writing everything and doing everything, collecting everything. Our advice is definitely to not be the martyr in this situation, to utilize everyone on your committee. So have a number of people that are collecting all the information for your portfolio, have a number of people who are working on the application, have a number of people that are maybe prepping for the interview. Dividing and conquering is really, really important here, to use the folks in your societies to help you. Lean on the society's office in your particular institution if you need support and guidance. And there's loads of people in your institutions that have probably applied for BICS Awards before. So there's a wealth of knowledge around there that you can ask in terms of how do we approach this, or I'm not sure about this question. And you can always reach out to BICS if there's something that you need clarity on as well. But it is important to utilize as many people as you possibly can to make it as easy and as enjoyable. We want this to be fun. We don't want this to come across as a test or an exam. So we want you to have fun while you're doing it. It should be a reflective piece where you look back on the year and think about what you've done and present that to the judges.
And just, I suppose, kind of following that, when you are dividing and conquering, when you're using many people from your committee, make sure that there's someone keeping an editorial eye on the content overall at the end of that process, so that it actually flows consistently, and that, like somebody who's written something in the treasurer section doesn't contradict what has been said in the communication section. So when you're utilizing more people, just make sure that there's one person then keeping an editorial eye on the application and the portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose from all of that then, so in terms of the process beforehand, writing the application, doing the portfolio, prepping for the interview, what can you expect on the actual day itself? So this is on the BICS website in terms of what the day will look like for a student who is coming as an applicant. You'll register between 10 and 11. You'll get kind of just checked in, just to make sure that you're there. You'll get the information about your interviews in advance of that. So you won't get that in the morning. You'll already know by the time you get there when and where your interview is. You'll meet myself and Sean and a couple of others. We'll do a welcome talk for the students at 11 a.m. just to kind of welcome you, settle you, and answer any questions that you might have. The interviews are split into kind of morning and afternoon-ish interviews, just because there's so many interviews we have to get through and so many limited rooms. So some people will have an interview in the morning and then you'll go for lunch. Some people will go for lunch and then have your interview. But that information will be provided to you, and lunch will be provided for you as well, so you don't have to worry about that. Between 1 and 1:30, we do want to get that group photo, like we showed you at the start of the session, just to document everyone that's there and to have a space together. We then have the rest of the interview sessions, generally, hopefully finishing by about 3:10. And then we have a really exciting opportunity for you for an hour from 3:30 to 4:30 that we really encourage all of you to attend if you can. And it's the peer-to-peer feedback sessions. And it's a space for you to connect with other society members who are also up for an award and to talk about what they did, maybe how you can collaborate, the things that they did well, the things that they had challenges with, and then to really share kind of best practice and to share kind of how your years have gone for each of you individually. And just to connect with other universities and institutions and to see the great work work that other societies are doing and to also showcase the work that you're doing. The awards bank will then start at about 7 p.m. Sean and myself and others will be probably working right up until 6:55 p.m., making sure that we get all of the applications back in, all of the awards back in. Once your interviews are finished, it takes some time for the judges to deliberate. So sometimes we're getting award winners' names back just before the awards banquet starts. The awards themselves will start after the dinner, so sometime between 10 and 10:30 p.m. and we'll go through each award in order as they come up. So that's roughly what the day will look like. As I said, there'll be plenty of people around to answer any questions, to guide you, to direct you. But we really encourage you to use this as an opportunity to talk to other societies and to use it as a networking opportunity. See if there's any societies that are similar to you, see if there's any societies that are different from you, and how can you connect together and use the space to get something out of it for the next year for your society. So, in terms of some final housekeeping then, and we promise we'll give some space then for questions from yourselves. Just some final kind of tips and tricks. There is eligibility criteria for some of the awards. For example, as we said, Best New Society, you can only be in existence for 2 years or less. If you're unsure about your eligibility, get in touch with either your society's office or us. Your college, as we said, must be a member of BICS. So if you're not a member of BICS, you are not eligible to apply. You must meet all the deadlines. So there's deadlines for when the application is due, there's deadlines when the portfolio is due, and obviously there is the awards interview that you must attend. Now, for some people, the time that we give them might be tricky to do. We do try to avoid clashes where possible. If you do have an issue with your interview, we do say kind of contact us as soon as possible so that we can try and rearrange it. Especially if you are nominating or representing more than one category. This tends to be a little bit of logistical nightmare for people, but if you're representing more than one category, that you inform us at the time that you're submitting so that we can ensure that A, your interviews don't clash, but B, that we can give you enough space in between everything else that you can get to both. And it's important when you're representing more than one award that you don't just copy and paste the answers from the one question into the other, that looking at the questions to see if there's any differences. Some questions will be the same and you can use the same information if you want. It's separate judging panels, but to make sure that you you answer the questions that you're being asked and making sure that you are eligible for the correct award. So, for example, in charity and civic awards, you must have a charity or civic element to your particular society. Departmental, you must have a particular departmental relationship in order to do that. Large and small colleges, we've already separated you out into that, so you don't have to worry about that. And a group whose main activity is recognised as by Student Sports Ireland as a sport or as an Olympic sport may not enter for an award at BICS either. But generally speaking, the vast majority of societies that enter awards, this doesn't necessarily apply to them. But it is important that you just check the eligibility of your society or yourself before you apply for the award.
Portfolios. So if a portfolio is required in your category, the nominee must provide just one portfolio, which includes all backup material. And as we kind of discussed already, that doesn't need to be a physical portfolio. So traditionally people would have sent hard copy physical portfolio documents, but it is perfectly acceptable to send an online version or a soft copy version of it as well. And judges will, of course, will accept that with no issue as well. And I suppose in the current context, in the current climate context and sustainability context, maybe a soft copy might be a better version. It's important that the portfolios are actually there and available on before the judging commences, because obviously there's a lot of scheduling to be done. There's a lot of organising of the adjudicators. They have to have the information there when they commence their adjudication on the Wednesday. And, you know, it's ultimately the adjudicator's discretion if they would accept anything later than that date, or, you know, like then when it is actually should be submitted. And if you're submitting to more than one award, you must have a copy of the portfolio for each award. Again, if it's a sort of copy version, that's easier to do than a hard copy printed version. So be aware of.
Yeah, go for Sean.
So just be aware that many award categories have specific criteria for eligibility. I think we touched on this point as well, so make sure that you familiarise these criteria before you start applying for the awards. So I suppose the main ones to watch there are probably the Best New Society. So it has to be a Best New Society from 2 years. You know, it can't have been set up greater than 2 years ago. And I think March 2023 is the date we have in mind. I think there's a specific date, but that's on the website. There's also some other rules for the best departmental society. I know that if you've won it 2 years in a row, you're not eligible to apply for it in the third year. So just make sure to check the award rules on the website before you go submitting to ensure that you're not putting in a lot of effort ultimately for it to be, you know, like that it can't actually be eligible for that criteria.
And that's it. I suppose that's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. There's a couple of other slides that we have that we can send out afterwards, but they're not really super relevant for right now. But I suppose we've tried to take you through a little bit of a overview of what the process is like, what the judges are looking for, and try to kind of clarify any of the common misconceptions and the common questions that we get from students who are applying for the BICS Awards. So I think we have about 15 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give you a space to ask us any questions that you might have, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them for you. Or I've just done such a good job, Sean, that they have no questions.
So I suppose, is there anyone on the call who has never been to BICS before?
No, I've never been to BICS, sorry.
Okay. So Aisling, is there any question? Has that clarified a bit about it, or is there anything you're thinking? Is there anything that you're thinking? God, I'm not sure about that.
No, in fairness, it was very you went through it so well actually, and I think for me, once I get the societies who are going to it, once I sit them down being like, right lads, this is the information ye need, I think that's when it'll all start coming together. But for the moment I think I'm good. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You know, like there's a BICS executive, there's ourselves, there's loads of people that you can ask questions to at the point of when the applications are being put together. We know yourself, like if you can come to this call, think that you've learned everything, and then you go to the application and go, God, I wish I knew about this. So don't feel like you can't reach back out. You know, Sean and I are happy to answer questions. So the BICS executive. We want to make the process, as you said, as easy as possible, as fun as possible, and that people don't feel like they're doing an exam right before their actual exams, and that it's more of a showcase of what the amazing work that they've done, and kind of get that feel for it. So anything that we can do to support that, we're happy to do.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and just that was amazing, and that's going to be available for people to watch back, or anybody that hasn't seen it. So next week we're actually going to delve into the actual application forms, have a good look at all the different questions, the tips, what you might include in your portfolio on a more macro level. And we've also this year introduced the appendix, and the appendix is literally a series of pieces of information that are just literally, we want information. So it's a bit like for the adjudicators. Often you'll have a beautiful portfolio and you'll have a very wordy, amazingly written application form. And the adjudicators are literally picking through it, saying, how many events do they actually have? How many people do they have? And, you know, because somebody's gone down a theme, it's so lovely, but you actually can't drill down into to find out just some stats. So the appendix is like stats, but the other thing that's kind of exciting about the appendix, it's going to be an uploadable PDF. So it will include links to all your social media, etc., because it can be quite difficult when we get paper copies of the application forms. And often the portfolios will be used to be in paper format, which is why we're encouraging a PDF. We're also looking into the possibility of being able to upload your portfolios. It will depend on the size and whether that's possible, but you'll know that a little bit nearer to the time. So as Cam said, it might very well be on a USB stick. But we're checking all of that out. So what the judges really, I suppose the takeaway from Sean and Cam is the judges are actually there to give you marks. And they will go to any length to find out what it is that you have done. So often it might be, I remember one year I was judging and I managed to get onto their Instagram, and I've seen all these great events on Instagram. And look at this is really interesting. They're going back and say, did they actually mention them? You know, so this is hopefully a way with the appendix that you can look and say, yeah, I've told them how many members I have. I definitely have a list of my events in there. This could come from your calendar. And as maybe time goes on, people will be collecting this information throughout the year. So we're really trying to simplify the process and make it really easy both for you to enter and for the judges to judge you, so that everybody is kind of working off a level playing field. And then we're actually really looking to see who was the best in whatever area. It's very subjective as well, so remember that. And but we love the fact that we get to see you all, and we're looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible in Sligo this year.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rena. We have a couple of minutes if there is any questions. If there's not, you are free to take the 9 minutes back from the session and do other things, or go outside and get a walk in the nice sun.
I think just as a final remark, I think touching on what Rena said there, it can be a daunting process when you're trying to apply for the awards. You're trying to remember all of the things that you've done throughout the year, and of course that's, you know, we're quite late on in semester 2 now. You might not remember exactly everything that you've done in semester 1, so it's important to just remember those resources that you have. So you might have a society calendar, you might have copies of your society emails that you've sent out to your members. So make sure to go over those resources before you're filling out, or as you're filling out your application form, just to ensure that you're capturing everything. And as Rena said there, actually go over your social media in advance as well, you know, to see what events you've advertised, because if you have it on your social media, more likely than not, it's something you could include in your application form and in your portfolio, and that will also get you some more marks and increase your chances of being successful in the awards. And I think then on the final point, actually getting to the BICS Awards is a good sign of success in it itself. It means you're the top society in that category from your college, and you're going to be competing with the top societies from other colleges as well. So that is a victory in itself. The actual winning is, you know, it's good to win, but it's not the be all and the end all. And the fact that you're actually representing your college at a BICS level means that there's a significant win in there in and of itself. So just to bear that in mind as well.
Right, well, with that in mind, let's say thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Sean. Laura, thanks a million for hosting the event. And any of you around next week, we'll see you then. And Aoife will be joining us as well. Thank you very much. And Aoife is our student rep. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Rena.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Bye.